You were never really a kid. Not because your childhood was short, but because something in it required you to be something other than a child while it was happening. That's not maturity. That's a nervous system handed adult weight before it had adult bones to carry it. Picture a child sitting at a table where the conversation is about things children should not have to hold: a parent's loneliness, money, a marriage unraveling. The child doesn't fully understand it, but they feel the weight settle on them, like something they're now responsible for. They go still. They stop causing trouble. They become the small adult in the room. Psychologists call this parentification, when a child is pulled into a role that belongs to a grown-up, and the cost is their own timeline. The child doesn't get to be careless. They get to be needed. The signs of that are still running in you now. Here's the first one. The first sign is that you have always felt out of place around people your own age. I just can't relate to them. You've said that. You assumed it meant you were more serious, more evolved. It didn't. It meant you were handed a frequency most children were never tuned to. When other kids were being loud and careless and young, you were already managing a room, a parent, a mood, a situation that needed an adult and got you instead. Their lightness felt foreign, not because you were better, because you were trained out of it before you ever got to be in it. You watched their ease like it was a country you didn't have a passport for. This isn't sophistication. This is what happens when a child is recruited into adult responsibility before they've finished being a child. If that is familiar, leave a 1 in the comments. But the second sign is the one that follows you into every room you walk into now. The second sign is that you are exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix, not physically. Something deeper, a tiredness behind the eyes, underneath the day, that was there before you got up and will be there when you lie back down. You've assumed this is just who you are, a tired person. But that exhaustion has an origin. It is the cost of decades of vigilance. When you grew up in an environment that required you to be on, monitoring tone, anticipating need, managing what was coming, your nervous system never learned to stand down. It is still scanning, still waiting for the thing that needs handling. Rest, for a body never given permission to be off duty, is just a slower version of alert. This isn't your constitution. This is what happens when a child's nervous system was never handed a genuine moment of safe, unmonitored ease. And then there is the sign that shows up in how you talk about your own past. The third sign is that you can barely remember being young. Ask you about your childhood, and something goes quiet. Not dramatic, just thin. A few images, the shape of a house, a face, but not the texture, not the feeling of being small and safe and unimportant in the best possible way. Other people pull out memories like photographs. Yours feel like documents, evidence of something survived rather than something lived. Bessel van der Kolk documented how early chronic stress reorganizes memory. The body encodes the emotional load, and the mind steps back from the detail. You don't remember being young because being young, for you, was not primarily a feeling. It was a function. This isn't a missing past. This is what happens when a child was too busy holding the house together to notice they were living in it. If that one landed, leave a 2 in the comments. What comes next is still happening right now. Now stop for a second. Feeling older than you are is not wisdom. It is weight that was never yours, worn so long it started to feel like identity. You didn't grow up fast because you were exceptional. You grew up fast because the environment demanded it, and you were the child who was there. That is not the same thing. And the last sign is where that weight finally shows its real cost. The fourth sign, and the deepest one, is that you grieve something you can't name. It arrives without warning. A song, a family in a park, someone else's child doing something completely ordinary, and something in you aches in a way the present moment doesn't explain. You call it nothing. You move past it. But that grief has a name. It is the childhood you were inside of but not fully in. The years that were happening while you were busy being needed. You didn't get to be feckless and young and completely irresponsibly unimportant. You got to be useful. Somewhere in you, the child who never got to put the weight down is still sitting there, not broken, just waiting for someone to finally say, "You don't have to hold this anymore. You don't have to keep being old. You were just never given permission to stop." Here is what is actually true. The first false belief is that your seriousness is your substance, that if you put the weight down, there will be nothing underneath. There will be. The weight was never you. It was the role. Let yourself be unproductive and temporarily unimportant without treating it as a failure. The second false belief is that the exhaustion is permanent. It is not how you are built. It is how you were trained. Practice standing down, deliberately, repeatedly, not waiting for it to feel natural, because it won't at first. The third false belief is that grieving what you missed means weakness. It means honesty. Name the loss without minimizing it, because you cannot release what you've never allowed yourself to hold. It started with a child handed something too heavy who carried it anyway, because there was no one else, and because being needed felt close enough to being loved. That child became someone who ages without lightning, who watches other people's carefreeness from a careful distance and calls it immaturity. The cost is specific. Rest that never fully arrives, grief that surfaces without explanation, a version of yourself that only exists when no one needs anything. What would change? Not tomorrow, not after some long process. If you finally stop mistaking the weight you were handed as a child for the shape of who you actually are. Send this to someone who has always seemed older than their age, because they probably never had anyone notice what that actually cost them.